from a small island boy to the ruler of an empire. This is not only the story of an emperor, it is the story of a man who believed nothing was impossible. Have you ever heard the name Napoleon Bonaparte? Some people remember him as a brilliant hero, while others see him as a dangerous ruler who wanted too much power. But one thing is certain: Napoleon became one of the most famous men in history. His story began in 1769 on the small island of Corsica near France. He was not born into a rich family, and as a child, he was quiet, serious, and loved reading books about war, history, and great leaders. When he was still young, he moved to France to study in a military school. Life there was difficult because many students laughed at his Corsican accent and treated him like an outsider. Napoleon often felt lonely, but instead of giving up, he spent long hours studying military strategy and dreaming about becoming important one day. Nobody imagined that this small boy would later rule much of Europe. As Napoleon grew older, France entered a period of chaos, known as the French Revolution. The people were angry with the king and demanded freedom and equality. Violence spread across the country, and many leaders lost control. During this unstable time, Napoleon joined the French army and quickly showed that he was intelligent, disciplined, and fearless. He became especially skilled at using artillery, the large, powerful guns used in war. His talent was so impressive that by the age of only 24, he became a general. Many people were shocked that such a young man could rise so quickly, but Napoleon had a special ability to understand battles and make fast decisions under pressure. Soldiers trusted him because he often led them to victory, even when the enemy army was larger and stronger. Soon, Napoleon became famous across France after winning important battles in Italy. Newspapers wrote about him constantly, and many citizens saw him as a national hero. But Napoleon did not only want success on the battlefield. He wanted glory, power, and greatness. He dreamed of building a huge empire, and one of the most interesting parts of his life began when he decided to travel to Egypt in 1798. At that time, France was fighting Britain, which was one of the strongest nations in the world. Napoleon believed that controlling Egypt could damage British trade routes to India and weaken Britain's power. So he sailed across the Mediterranean Sea with thousands of soldiers. When the French army arrived in Egypt, many Egyptians were surprised by the discipline and advanced weapons of the French soldiers. Napoleon tried to present himself as a friend of the Egyptian people. He even claimed that he respected Islam and local traditions, hoping the people would accept French rule. But many Egyptians did not trust the foreign army, and resistance soon began in different cities. However, this expedition was not only military. Napoleon also brought scientists, engineers, artists, and scholars because he was fascinated by history and ancient civilizations. One of Napoleon's most famous victories happened near the pyramids close to Cairo. Before the battle, he reportedly told his soldiers, "From the top of these pyramids, 40 centuries looked down upon you." The French army defeated the Mamluk forces using modern tactics and strong organization. After the victory, Napoleon entered Cairo and gained control over much of Egypt. But his success did not last long, because the British Navy attacked and destroyed many French ships during the Battle of the Nile. Suddenly, Napoleon and his army were trapped in Egypt, far from France and surrounded by enemies. Even though the military campaign became difficult, something very important happened during Napoleon's time in Egypt. The scientists and scholars he brought with him studied ancient temples, statues, and writings. During this expedition, French soldiers discovered the famous Rosetta Stone, which later helped historians understand ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. Because of Napoleon's campaign, Europe became much more interested in the history and mysteries of ancient Egypt. In this way, his journey influenced not only war and politics, but also science and archaeology. However, life in Egypt became harder for the French army. There were battles, diseases, shortages of supplies, and increasing resistance from local people. Meanwhile, France itself was facing political problems back home. Napoleon decided to secretly leave Egypt and return to France, leaving many of his soldiers behind. Some people criticized this decision and considered it selfish, but when Napoleon returned, many citizens still welcomed him as a hero because France was unstable and needed strong leadership. In 1799, Napoleon seized power through a coup and soon became the leader of France. A few years later, he crowned himself Emperor of France, showing that he trusted his own power more than anyone else's approval. Under his leadership, France became extremely powerful, and Napoleon won many battles across Europe. Kings and emperors feared him because his army moved quickly and fought with discipline and confidence. At the height of his power, Napoleon controlled or influenced much of Europe. But success slowly made him too ambitious. In 1812, he made one of the greatest mistakes of his life by invading Russia. At first, his enormous army advanced successfully, but the Russian winter became a nightmare. The freezing cold, hunger, disease, and exhaustion destroyed his army. Thousands of soldiers died, and Napoleon was forced to retreat. His enemies across Europe realized he was no longer unbeatable. Nations joined together against him and finally defeated him. Napoleon lost power and was exiled to the island of Elba. Surprisingly, he later escaped and returned to France for a short period known as the 100 Days. Many soldiers sent to stop him instead chose to join him again, because they still admired him deeply. But Europe united one final time against Napoleon. In 1815, he fought his last battle at Waterloo and suffered a final defeat. This time he was sent far away to the remote island of St. Helena in the Atlantic Ocean, where escape was almost impossible. There, far from power and glory, Napoleon spent the last years of his life thinking about his victories, mistakes, and dreams. He died in 1821, but his story never disappeared. Today, people around the world still study and discuss Napoleon Bonaparte because his life was extraordinary. He changed Europe, influenced military strategy, and left a lasting mark on history. His campaign in Egypt also opened a new chapter in the world's interest in ancient Egyptian civilization. From a lonely boy on a small island to one of the most powerful rulers in history, Napoleon's journey remains one of the most fascinating stories ever told.